Welcome, everyone, to this Living in Oneness Summit Global Program. I'm Steve Farrell, the Worldwide Executive Director for Humanities team, and it's great to be with you. We have a great program in store. Really looking forward to the next 60 to 90 minutes.
Hi, Dr. Michael. Um, we lost Steve. So if you could, Dr. Michael, if you could give a brief introduction to our listeners, I'm sure we'll get Steve back, but he's frozen in internet space. So if you could please give us an introduction. I'm going to try to get in touch with Steve to maybe reconnect. Okay?
Yeah,
Thank you.
Well, welcome everyone. My name is Michael Gaeta, and I'm really thrilled to be with you today, as I have for the past few years on this Living in Oneness Summit. I'm so appreciative of the work of Steve Farrell and the entire Humanities team grouping. The work that you're all doing is just amazing, and this whole theme of returning or living in oneness and awakening humanity to the experience of oneness is such a theme that's been important to me over my lifetime and in my career and in practice as an acupuncturist and dietitian, nutritionist, and herbalist. And what Steve and I wanted to explore today is a very useful subject that's very practical as well for our living today. And living in oneness and how this applies to healing is such an important area for us to consider as people. And certainly in my experience as a health professional, working with patients, many thousands of patients over the past 27 years, certainly there's applications to this to a healthcare practice and working with a health professional. But even beyond that, I wanted to, and Steve and I really wanted to emphasize that there's something that applies to all of us in our daily lives. And there's something magical about the oneness perspective related to how we live our lives as people, and also those of us who are facing health challenges and might be working with a health professional, how that can be the most generative and creative experience. Wanted to begin with a quote from Dr. Stanislav Grof, who said this to say, he's a physician, MD, PhD, and he said, the only revolution that can work is the inner transformation of every human being. I love that, and it really underlines for me this perspective of that we change the world from the inside out. And in a very real sense, there is no outside world separate from our own consciousness. The world that we observe is a projection of our own consciousness, of our own hearts and minds. And so the way to change that outer world, at least in an initial sense, is to allow our own consciousness, our own perspective, to change on that world that we see. And as we change how we see that, oh, is that Steve?
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened. My link dropped. That's never happened before. So
sure.
Apologies to everybody. Hopefully everybody can hear me fine. I'm now on audio anyway.
Sound great, Steve.
All right, super. Well, again, apologies. I know Caroline came in to share how people can share their questions, correct?
No, not yet.
Actually, not yet, Steve. After you dropped, I invited Michael to give an introduction. Sorry we lost Steve by video, but we have Steve by audio. Great. Those that are listening in, with your GoToWebinar panel on the right-hand side, there is a pane called Questions. So if you have questions for Steve or Dr. Michael at any point, you can always type those questions. You can click on the little triangle will open up the box and you can type in your questions and we will be able to get to your questions at some point in the show. So thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Carolyn.
Okay, all right. So thank you, Caroline. Let's see here. We can hear. Let me just turn down the.
Oh, there you are, Steve.
Oh, now I'm back on camera here. So look at that, huh? All right, I'm going to go ahead and hang up here. I'll call back in if I need to.
Sure.
Okay, so can you hear me okay?
Really well.
Okay, fantastic. So let me give you a proper introduction here, Michael. Sorry, everybody, for that hasn't happened to me before, where I've lost my camera. So here's a proper introduction for Dr. Michael Gaeta. He is a visionary national natural healthcare educator, a clinician and writer. He's the founder of the Clinicians Mastermind Circle, a one-year training and certification program in natural functional medicine. He works with natural health professionals across the United States who want to improve their patient care and practice success in order to create a world of resilient, vital people who make a difference through positive contribution. You can visit michaelgaeta.com or cliniciansmastermind.com to learn more. And welcome, Michael, to the program.
Thanks, Steve. Great to be back.
All right. And we've just had fantastic programs with Michael over the years. Really looking forward to this one in 2017. So, Michael, let's begin by just maybe talking about your journey in holistic healthcare as a holistic healthcare practitioner. Maybe go ahead and take us back, if you would, to how you started this journey.
Thanks, Steve. And yeah, I had an early desire to be involved in some type of helping or healing profession. My first career was in music. I played the piano and felt that that was wonderful mode of expression, but was incomplete. I felt like I wanted to do some more specific healing work. So I was a psychology major for a little while in college and was going to be a psychologist, and realized that there was something else that wanted to come through me in terms of hands-on work. And then I became exposed to Chinese medicine and really fell in love with that kind of approach that was based in literally a oneness perspective, that the basic philosophy of it was this perspective of oneness, of the Tao, as the foundation of this system of medicine. And so that really attracted me, and then I continued my studies into nutrition and herbal medicine and body work as I went along. But I think probably the initial impetus was I went through a pretty dark period in my life for about 8 years, from starting at about age 11, so kind of pre-teen, into my later teens, where I was, it was a pretty dark time in my life, honestly, Steve, where I really had to deal with suicidal depression and really a sense that the world, if this was life, then I think I want to check out. And that was a difficult time for me, but I'm thankful for it because it helped me become who I am today and set me on a path where I wanted to allow my life to be used in service to something larger and to provide as much blessing and help and assistance and guidance that I could to others. And I'm really deeply appreciative of the mentors that I've had along the way in my life, who I believe are, responsible for me still being here, and getting a sense that life was worth living, and that I had something to contribute. There was a time in this kind of first of 3 kind of suicidal contemplations. I was there in my bedroom, and I was sitting there just in despair, just complete despair, and a book. There was no earthquake. This was in New York City, where I used to live. And a single book dislodged itself from the top shelf of the bookshelf and hit me right here on the head. And it was Dr. Wayne Dyer's Your Erroneous Zones, which was his first book. And and I kid you not, there was no earthquake in New York that day. Just this single book dislodged itself, came off the shelf, and hit me in the head. So I took that as a sign that I should read that book. And that book really, I think, was part of this process of coming more into life and not being centered, I think, in death and dying, but to be of living and of being of service. And so that was kind of an initial starting point, that time in my life, and that was one important moment in it where I really had a commitment to living and through that to service. And that brought me to the healing path and started my practice 27 years ago in New York. And then 24 years ago started teaching. I realized that I had a real desire to teach, and part of that was from one of my early mentors. I'd say my second mentor in my life, other than my dad, was Marianne Williamson, who I know you have a connection with, and many of us do. And I had a chance to work for her for 3 years in New York. And I remember sitting there. I was just Guy Friday, just doing whatever needed to be done at her lectures, carrying boxes, running the mic, doing a head count, things like that. This is before she was really huge and her first book came out. And I remember it was question and answer session, and I had the microphone in my hand, ready for her to say, okay, we're going to take questions now. And then I just looked at her and I said, you know what, I can do that. And I just had this initial feeling like there's something that's looking to come through me in the spoken word. And then that evolved into I can do that, and then I should do that, and then I must do that, and I will do that, over the 3 years that I worked for her. And so speaking and teaching, has become kind of the main focus of my life, although I still practice part-time. But I would say, Steve, the initial genesis of that was going through a fairly kind of dark night of the soul, that life had a plan for me, and I realized that I had a purpose for living, and that if I was going to stick around, that I should be about that purpose.
Yeah, wow. Well, and let me share. Michael lives here in Boulder, Colorado with me. In fact, his son, Joseph, is in
Yes.
my daughter Sophie's 6th grade class at the Waldorf School. And he has a beautiful family. Oh, my goodness. Yeah, there's Joseph, and he has a beautiful daughter, too. And so as he's talking about early beginnings and challenges, he's really there. There's his daughter. He's really put it all together. Just has a beautiful, beautiful family and practice. And again, Michael, always great to have you here on the program with us.
Thanks, Steve.
Maybe you can talk a little bit about, you covered a few things there. You are an educator, as you mentioned, that consumes a lot of your time. Take us into your practice, if you would. You shared that oneness is a part of your practice. Of course, you fly around the country, you teach healthcare professionals. Tell us a little bit about that. Let's just kind of start at the top. How do you teach oneness and healthcare? And if you can, let's even bring in practical aspects.
I'd love to.
Might speak to people, each of us with our own families in terms of how to stay healthy.
Yes, thanks, Steve. And I practiced full-time for 19 years in New York City, where I grew up. And then almost 8 years ago now, moved to Colorado. And then my life sort of switched from full-time practice and part-time education to full-time education and part-time practice. So that's where I am now. And most of my life is in education, mostly educating other health professionals who want to improve their patient care and their practice success from a perspective of self-development and oneness. And so, honestly, most of the time I'm doing clinical trainings for practitioners. I'll be in Little Rock, Arkansas this week. I was just in Alameda, California, not too far from where you were in Silicon Valley back in the day, in that general part of the country. And so most of my time is spent teaching other health professionals. And it's interesting. It's an interesting question, Steve, because I have this larger perspective, and it's always the question of how do I bring that into like a clinical training on cardiovascular health or autoimmune disease or endocrine balance or immunity, or how do you bring that perspective in? So I try to do that kind of in the early part of the seminar, where I'll just share that the holistic perspective starts from a place of oneness and starts with what's right in a person. The reductionist model of start with what's wrong and attack it, so diagnose and treat, find what's wrong and go after it, has value, but it's very limited in that it's disease-centered, and that the holistic approach doesn't start with separation. as reductionism starts with separation. I'm separate from you, we're separate, and this disease is something that we have to go attack, and this whole reductionist perspective. In the holistic perspective, we start with a common ground, a starting point of oneness and innate wholeness, where we're starting with what's right in a person. We're starting and we're moving on what's right in a person and seeking to increase that. And that's a very different perspective, even than what I was taught in acupuncture school, where a patient comes in and you make an assessment and you make a diagnosis and then you come up with a treatment plan, kind of standard thing. And there's a place for that. I'm not down on that. That's very important. Because as one of my teachers used to say, he was an older British man, and he said, well, sometimes a patient comes in looking like the dog's breakfast, and they're in a bad way, and they need help, and we need tools to help them, and people come to people like me for a drug-free approach, where it's nature first and drugs last. So I try to begin the seminars with this perspective of innate wholeness and oneness, and starting with what's right as our beginning point in the seminar, but also in our beginning point in working with patients. And I've been teaching now 24 years and lecturing nationally for 20 years, and it's amazing how many practitioners have come up to me over the years and said, well, I really appreciate that you started with that perspective. It's the first seminar I've ever been to, and I've been a chiropractor for 30 years, and I've been to hundreds of seminars, and no one's ever started a clinical training, starting with what's right in a person and our common ground of oneness. And so I do my best, and then on the breaks I'll play quotes, inspirational quotes that are just playing quietly in the background while we're on a break or on our lunchtime. And it's I've got a lot of positive feedback. Wow, people are taking their phones out and taking pictures of the quotes, and just do what I can in the midst of a clinical training to bring something of this perspective into the room.
Yeah, boy, that's beautiful. I love that. And of course, you come from this perspective. When we say oneness, we're talking about emanation of the divine, right? That we're all interconnected, interrelated, and interdependent in the divine. So, which of course is a long way off from this separation of God in the sky and the other person and nature over here and over there. Okay, this is wonderful, and I love. I can see why people, Michael, would come up to you during breaks and share that they love the way you're starting the program with this whole oneness and wholeness, and how we can inspire and manifest more of that, as opposed to attacking the problem. Because when we attack a problem, we push it away and we make it worse. Let's go down a level. I know your kids have never taken antibiotics, I think you said.
It's true.
And they're in
no
great
vaccines,
health.
no
Again,
antibiotics.
just a beautiful family. So talk to us about then this healthcare that you're recommending to these practitioners. Of course, it starts with this oneness perspective of wholeness and oneness, and wanting to create more of that. But what are some of the practical things then? I know you address autoimmune, you address vaccines. By the way, there's a question here from Alice in Ellensburg, Virginia. We're going to get to your question, Alice, here shortly. What are practical things that you recommend to these healthcare practitioners that would be valuable for this listening audience?
Sure. And Steve, if I could, I want to just read one little quote from A Course in Miracles, if I might, on this subject. And it relates to the healing relationship. And this is, it says this: you do not make yourself the bearer of the special gift that brings the healing. Now, speaking to a health professional, you but recognize your oneness with the one who calls for help. For in this oneness is their separate sense dispelled. And it is this separate sense that makes them sick. So I love that. I wanted to pull out a couple of things that will be relevant to our topic today, and just this oneness perspective. And I know we've riffed on this quite a bit in prior summits, and of the starting point of any relationship, and certainly any healing relationship, being that we are together, we are one. I was really moved when the presidential candidate Bernie Sanders, and I'm not making any political statements here, I'm just quoting the guy. Someone asked him what his religion was, And he says, my religion is that we're all in this together. That is my religion. And it was beautiful, just very simply said, but bringing something of this oneness perspective into the healing arts, into our starting point of our relationships, and into our thinking of the world, is a very creative and exciting place to go.
Let me bring in some questions. We've got questions coming in here from viewers that really get us down to a practical level.
Great.
This is, here's one. Again, this one is from Alice in Ellensburg. There's some other people as well. I have a question for Dr. Michael. I have a 17-year-old daughter who is considering getting the HPV vaccine. What advice would you give to young women and their parents about the HPV vaccine?
Yes, yeah, Gardasil is the most common one. Well, I've looked at this a fair bit, and I started looking at the vaccine question when I started treating children in my practice 25 years ago. And in taking a history, just one day, a mother came in, the child was 3 years old, and was really in a bad way. Digestive, respiratory, neurological problems, autism diagnosis, or autism spectrum, somewhere on the spectrum. Mostly functional, not severe, but definitely somewhere on that spectrum. And just something occurred to me. It was like this flash of inspiration, this intuition. Just the first time this ever happened. I said, well, when did the problem start related to their vaccines? And I was taught the vaccines were safe. I got all my vaccines, which was about 10 vaccines. I was born in '69, and I got all my shots, which was 10 shots. Today it's 72, not 10, individual vaccines given. And so she paused, and then this look came over her face like, wow, I never realized that their symptoms started within days of receiving her 2-year shots. And so I started making it a practice. I said, oh, that's interesting. And then I started asking all these parents who would bring their kids in for natural or holistic care, when did their symptoms start related to their vaccines? And 90% of them, this is a lot of kids over a lot of years, 90% of their issues started within hours, days, or a couple of weeks after a vaccine visit. Which they, so that got me interested in this subject because I was treating these kids and I needed to help them. And then, wonderful thing happened. I was going to have a kid, my first child, Joseph, and he's 12 and a half now. So it was about 13 years ago. I said, wow, I'm going to have a kid. I better get really educated about this subject. And so I went even deeper into the subject, and in this process of the past 25 years of looking into this vaccine issue, I have come to, and reading a lot of research, a lot of science, a lot of evidence, and hearing, dozens, hundreds, and indirectly through my networks, thousands of parents telling the same story of how their children were injured by vaccines. And vaccine injury is not just autism. There's hundreds of diseases that directly are caused by vaccines. My conclusion, Steve, is that vaccines do much more harm than good. And I'm not saying you can't prevent a couple of mild self-limiting infections like chickenpox and measles and this really minor league stuff that is not dangerous or life-threatening. You can prevent a few cases of that, but at what cost? And so this Gardasil, or this HPV vaccine, is kind of the first in dozens of cancer vaccines that are in development. There's 276 new vaccines in development. And Gardasil is an amazing story because, and HPV vaccines are an amazing story because for several reasons. One is the number of adverse effects from these vaccines is staggering. And that if you look up Dr. Diane Harper was hired by Merck to do some of the clinical trials on HPV, and she finally, her conscience weighed on her so much, she had to come out publicly and say, look, this vaccine is dangerous. And I helped do the testing to get it approved. And this vaccine is dangerous, and there's no evidence at all, zero evidence. That means, nada, niente, squat, no evidence that it prevents any form of cancer, and it can actually increase the likelihood of infection from other strains of HPV. Depending on the HPV vaccine, it'll have 3, 6, or 9 strains. There are 100 strains of HPV, and your receiving the vaccine will increase your susceptibility to the other strains, and it does not prevent cervical cancer. This vaccine is a hoax. It's extremely dangerous. Many countries around the world, Japan withdrew the vaccine from its recommended schedule. Many countries now are questioning because they're seeing dozens, hundreds of permanent injuries, deaths. There are now thousands of stories of adolescent girls being permanently injured with Guillain-Barré syndrome, with forms of paralysis, other autoimmune diseases. This is a very dangerous vaccine that has no benefit. And I would state that for most vaccines, honestly, my 2 kids are completely unvaccinated based on the evidence, based on the science, the independent and credible science. And so HPV is a classic example of how the vaccine industry manipulates data and research and scares people into accepting vaccines that actually have not been proven to be effective or safe. Last thing I'll say, Steve, is and to you, Allison, is the HPV vaccine was never tested in any safety study at all compared to a placebo or an inert substance like saline injection, just salt water injection, or or a sugar pill, is the standard thing. It was compared to the vaccine adjuvant, which is aluminum, in its safety testing. So if you give somebody the full vaccine and then you give somebody the everything except the virus, and then you compare the two, the injury rate is going to be about the same. And so let's say, oh, well, it was just as there was no additional injuries compared to placebo. This is the only class of drugs. Vaccines are the only class of drugs that are not categorized as drugs. They're classified as biological agents, and so they're exempt from safety testing where it actually compares them against a placebo. They're actually compared against other vaccines or the vaccine adjuvant, which is highly toxic substances like aluminum. So you should know that there has not been a single safety study done on this vaccine or any vaccine that would be considered credible from a scientific perspective. So we are literally experimenting on our kids with every vaccine injection because there have been no credible, independent, valid, placebo-based safety studies.
Yeah, let me bring in, there's Janice in North Carolina asks about the shingles vaccine. I'm going to guess we're still, you would make the same points here, huh?
Yeah, similar. Yeah, the shingles vaccine was developed because of the chickenpox vaccine. Chickenpox vaccine suppresses chickenpox, a normal, natural, I still have my scar right here from when I was 9 and got the chickenpox back along the way. And therefore I have lifelong immunity. And because we suppress chickenpox, this normal immune-building, immune-enhancing, non-dangerous, self-limiting rash, childhood disease, because we suppress chickenpox in childhood, we've exploded the incidence of shingles in adulthood, which is awesome if you're a drug company, because then they can give you another vaccine or another antiviral drug. So this is a classic example of how suppressing natural, non-dangerous, mild childhood diseases, which I can tell you for sure, and we've known this in Chinese medicine for thousands of years, children need to get sick. Children must go through cycles of infection in order to detoxify maternal toxins, pass through the placenta and through breast milk. Children need to get sick to burn out toxins that they're exposed to early on. Children need to get sick to develop their immune system. So this whole anti-life, antibiotic, anti-bug approach is completely false and is extremely dangerous. And so the shingles vaccine is, another money-making ploy which arose from the widespread use of the chickenpox vaccine.
So, Michael, thank you. And here's we've got listeners have lots of health-related questions there.
Okay, sure.
Let me just get to them. This let's see who this is from. This is from Carl or Carrie in Kennewick, Washington. Carrie says, I'm 56 years old. When I was 15, I had most of my thyroid removed due to a non-cancerous growth. I'm taking levothyroxine.
Yep.
Are there natural medicines that I can take rather than the synthetic drugs? I have so many women friends my age that are on thyroid medicine. Why is that?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. And yeah, there's 3 different forms of thyroid replacement, and I want to draw a distinction between thyroid support, which are things we can do or supplements you can take that strengthen your own thyroid. Sounds like you've got some of yours left, which is great. So thyroid support is using diet and supplementation to strengthen your own thyroid. And thyroid replacement, on the other hand, is taking external hormone into your body to replace a serious deficiency of what you're not making on your own. And there's 3 different ways to do that. You're using method 1, which is the most common prescription drug in the world, which is most commonly prescribed, which is levothyroxine, or brand name Synthroid is a popular one. And this is synthetic T4, which then your body hopefully will convert reasonably well into T3, which is the more active form of thyroid hormone. I consider taking synthetic T4 to be the worst form of replacement. The second form would be to have a compounding pharmacy create a bioidentical T3-T4 combination. And you'd go to a natural health professional or who's able to prescribe that for you. And then the third form of thyroid replacement, which is what I recommend, is using glandular replacement. So using the whole gland, which is relatively sort of kind of more like a food than a drug, such as pig or sheep or cow thyroid, then that can be that is the original form of thyroid replacement. Some popular ones that you may have heard of would be Armour thyroid, which is American pig thyroid, Naturothyroid, which is the same thing. I recommend a New Zealand sheep thyroid product in my own practice. There's many different ways to do this, and my approach, having had a lot of experience in helping folks with thyroid issues, is to do both thyroid support, help your own gland work better, as well as replacement for as short amount of time as you need it. The idea is to give enough support so that you need less and less replacement over time, so that you have a more kind of natural approach that helps your own thyroid work better. So yeah, if I would just consult a natural health professional who's trained in this area. You can also get a hold of us here. Our number here is 303-442-2525, and that's our number. Or you can just go to my website. Actually, I might as well mention this now. We created a web page for Humanities Team, people associated with Humanities Team, which is michaelgaeta.com, michaelgaeta.com/HT, Humanities Team. So if you go to michaelgaeta.com/HT, you can learn about the practice if you're interested. If you're a health professional, there are trainings there. And also, I have an ebook that I just revised just for this summit on vaccines, which I'd love to give to all of you for free for being here today. It's a short little ebook, about 40 pages, on vaccines that I'd love to give to each of you for free. Just go to michaelgaeta.com/HT.
Okay, thank you for that, Michael. And this is a question from Allison in Kansas City. She says, I have scleroderma and wondering how I can supplement my treatments for nausea naturally.
Yeah, well, one of the best treatments for nausea is a 7,000-year-old herb, ginger. And ginger is a wonderful, simple ginger tea, or you can slice up some ginger root and simmer 5 pieces for 5 minutes and drink the tea. Or just stick a tea bag in a cup of hot water. You can do that 2 or 3 times a day. It's a simple home remedy. There are natural supportive treatments available to improve your self-repair and healing with scleroderma and other autoimmune conditions. And so I would, find a health professional who is trained in that area, and you can certainly contact us, and we have a network of practitioners around the country who have studied directly with me, who we can refer you to, or in our own practice, we offer phone and remote video kind of virtual appointment consultations.
Okay, and Michael, this is from Janelle in Los Angeles. She says, can you explain how antibiotics are supposed to work and why the more one takes them, the less they work? I'd like to be able to explain to my daughter.
Absolutely, great question. Thank you. So, and that brings up a wonderful piece I'd love to mention, Steve. Antibiotics are an effort to reduce bacterial infection, and they've been around for about 100 years, roughly. And the effect of antibiotics is to clear the most superficial layer of infection at the expense of creating resistant strains of that bacteria. So, for example, let's say you have a sinus infection or a urinary infection. Let's say you have a urinary infection, urinary tract infection, UTI. You'll take antibiotics, and it will wipe out, say, the top layer of the bacteria causing that infection, but there will be some of those bacteria that will survive. And those bacteria will learn, they will actually change, and they will mutate, in a sense, to become resistant to that antibiotic. So that the next time you take that same antibiotic, say Cipro or ciprofloxacin, that won't work as well, because some of those bacteria survive, will be resistant, and here's what's interesting, they can transfer that resistance to non-resistant bacteria. They can kind of share the secret code. They'll say, hey, if you ever run into this, do this, and it won't kill you. And they can transfer that resistance. So the more antibiotics you take, the less effective you become because of this transferable bacterial resistance. But that's not the worst of it. The worst of it is the effect on what we call the human microbiome. And the human microbiome at a simple level are the 3 to 4 pounds of gut bacteria that get wiped out, especially by broad spectrum antibiotics like erythromycin, Cipro, and other broad spectrum antibiotics. They cause widespread damage. And it's very interesting, Steve. I just gave a talk on the microbiome in Texas a few weeks ago. So this is really in my consciousness. The microbiome at a physical level establishes the unity and oneness of all physical life. And we could talk about our oneness spiritually, but that manifests physically in the microbiome, which are simply speaking, these microscopic organisms, most but not all bacteria, that are everywhere. And 90%, up to 90% of all of our body, in terms of cell count, the number of cells in our body, are bacteria. So 90%, up to 90%, it's 80 to 90% of the human body is bacterial. And this has a oneness, it establishes a oneness physically with our environment. Every time we breathe, we're breathing in and exhaling this microbiome, this living exchange of life. There's no separation between us and and the outer world through the soil, through our foods, through the air we breathe. We share this bacterial oneness with all life and with the earth at a physical level. And this completely destroys all the old notions of disease. This whole idea that you can vaccinate your way to health is absurd, and take antibiotics to safely get rid of infections. My current thinking, and I'll refer you to a book called Missing Microbes, written by an NYU medical school dean. And my basic suggestion is to never, ever take antibiotics at any time for any reason, ever, unless you're about to die of a bacterial infection. That's my current recommendation, because the devastating effects of antibiotics can be very long-term and even lifetime. And there are great natural approaches available that you can effectively improve your immune response and work with infections naturally. And I would just consult a natural health professional near you, an acupuncturist, naturopath, herbalist, someone who's trained in this area, and we can share with you our list of practitioners that I've trained, or work with you ourselves. My associate and I work with people as well. There's just so many great options available that are safe and don't cause all this collateral damage.
Boy, that's a strong statement. Would never take antibiotics ever. And your kids haven't taken it.
Yeah, unless you're going to die of a bacterial infection.
Yeah, that's a strong statement, but boy, you live it, and your kids are as healthy as they come. Michael, I am completely holistic and will only use a holistic approach. I get many telling me that this is not wise. What can I say to these people? This is from Kathy in Los Angeles.
Hey, Kathy, I'm high-fiving you for going natural. Just remind your friends that conventional medicine is the #1 cause of death. That modern medicine kills over 1 million people per year from adverse drug reactions, unnecessary surgeries, ineffective procedures, killing 1 million people a year. And you can read all the statistics. You can look up the article by Dr. Carolyn Dean, who's a physician, and many others contributed, called Death by Medicine. And you can look it up. It's a free article, Death by Medicine, and you can read all the statistics yourself. But the attacking disease with drugs and surgery and chemotherapy and vaccines and antibiotics, this approach has failed to safely improve people's health. You don't produce health by attacking disease. You experience vitality or wellness, well-being, what we might call health, by increasing and doing things which support that, and eliminating the barriers to the full natural expression of health. So I'm not down on medicine. I'm not down on drugs. The drugs are just massively overused. We have 5% of the world's population in the U.S., Steve, and we consume nearly 50% of the world's pharmaceutical drugs at the highest cost of any nation on earth, and we have the worst health outcomes across the board compared to any advanced nation. So to think that going holistic is dangerous is just a very kind of sick fantasy that ignores the actual facts of the matter, which is, we take the most drugs and have the worst health outcomes, and the most vaccines, by the way, and the worst health outcomes.
Yeah, I'm glad you're calling attention to these things, Michael, and also bringing them down in a very practical way, so that we can, really, we can see how we should apply these things in our own family environment. Namely, that, as you say, starting with oneness, just looking at what is whole and what is what's alive and well, and inspiring that, and these things, antibiotics that are way overused, and vaccines, and to to really be suspect, and to do our own homework, to Google these things and make informed decisions. Here's a question from somebody. This is from Linda. She says, "How do you feel about using colloidal silver?"
Colloidal silver is, an option. I haven't used it much clinically. I've experimented with it personally. Haven't, been wowed, I guess I would say. I know it's helped some people. I think it's probably safe to use. It's just not something that I've had a lot of experience or success with myself. But I've heard lots of stories, from being on the road, that's been helpful for a lot of people. So if it's that or an antibiotic, for sure, anything but the drug. Always, again, the philosophy is nature first, drugs last. Nature first. So drugs are not bad, they're just overused. Conventional medicine is not bad, it's just overused. And we want to adopt a lifestyle of nature first and drugs last.
Michael, here's a question. The person says, I have adrenal fatigue due to chronic stress at work. I feel so
Yep.
tired, exhausted all the time. I
Yeah.
suppose I'm not alone here. What can we do to cure this and to have enough energy, again, to get through the day? Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
That's great. Yeah, so a couple of specific practical things. I would definitely, so first off, find a natural health professional who can put together an individualized program for you. I'll give you some suggestions I found helpful. One is having it is not in order of importance, but salt is really important, and I routinely recommend patients, people in general, take in a teaspoon a day, like using a measuring spoon of natural sea salt. I use Celtic sea salt. You can use Himalayan or real salt, whatever. But a teaspoon a day of a sea salt is very useful, and especially important when you have adrenal issues. The adrenal glands, without going into all the biochemistry, need salt. They need sodium to function. So that's one simple thing. And you've got to get a hold of your sleep. So having like dim lights, quiet, meditation, journaling, reviewing the day, whatever you can do in that hour before sleep so that you sleep as well as possible. Completely dark, use eye shades if you need it. Totally quiet, use earplugs if you need it. But you've got to sleep well. Take naps, 20-minute nap a day, as soon as you can in the afternoon or late morning, depending on your schedule. But naps and getting your sleep together will be very helpful. Other things that are supportive of the microbiome in a general sense, I take it every day myself, a tablespoon, which is 15 milliliters of apple cider vinegar, like a raw organic Bragg's type apple cider vinegar. Tablespoon a day is just a very good thing to do in general for most people. And also raw honey. I get good compliance on this. A teaspoon of raw, has to be raw, honey is super helpful as well. So those are a couple of suggestions that can be useful in generally, supporting your recovery. And, having worked with, hundreds of patients over the years with adrenal issues, actually probably thousands at this point, I would definitely recommend, in addition to those really good suggestions, to consult a practitioner who's had a lot of experience in this area, and they can help you out.
Great stuff. Apple cider vinegar and raw honey. Okay, got them on the list here, Michael. Thank you. Let's talk about just, in the oneness perspective, the
Yes.
metaphysical is so important. And you mentioned
Yes.
you worked closely with Marianne Williamson back in the day.
Yes.
Especially at times like this, following the election here in the United States, and of course, just with the divisiveness all over the planet, the challenges, the polarity.
Yes.
What are things that you recommend from a health perspective to make sure we don't kind of get under? You can kind of get into the crouched position,
Sure.
and more be connected with the problems. It kind of goes back to what you were talking about at the very beginning of the program, Michael, where the focus is more on what's whole, on divine connection, on blessing, on grace, on peace, on health, as opposed to falling into that crouched position and just being kind of underneath problems and stress and fatigue. Do you have any? And you kind of got to this in the hour before sleep. I love those suggestions you made.
Yes.
But suggestions around metaphysically, how to really stay healthy and joyful.
I appreciate that, Steve. Thank you for bringing that in. And I'll just quote Martin Luther King. He said, "A darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that." And so I've really been concerned, and I live in a town. We live in a town here in Boulder where there's been most of the town has been under sort of a dark cloud since the election, and I don't share that myself. I don't share that perspective, but I'm not making any political statements here, but I will say that if you're in a place of hate or negativity, I guess you'd say, but in a place of hate towards anyone, you're weakening yourself and making yourself ineffective and actually at the effect of that thing or that person that you hate. And so, you know, I've just been concerned, as you have been, Steve, and you really have your finger on the global pulse, you know, given your wonderful work with HT, that there's another place for us to go. I like the thought that keeps coming to me is, come on, folks, you know better than that. You can do better than that. That's not like you. To like people who are kind of spiritually aware, diving down into this like level of divisiveness and opposition and separation and hate, which is not going to generate the solution that we seek. And so, you know, as you know, and you've been teaching this for years, you know, we have to start from a place of oneness with. And I'll read, you know, from my old mentor, from her first book, A Return to Love, from Marianne. This is from her book, page 31, if you're interested. Actually, no, it starts on page 30. If you go deeply enough into your mind and deeply enough into mine, we have the same mind. The concept of a divine mind is the idea that at our core we are not just identical, but actually the same being. There is only one begotten Son doesn't mean that someone else was it and we're not. It means that we're all it. There's only one of us here. We're like the spokes on a wheel, all radiating out from the same center. If you define us according to our position on the rim, then we are distinct and separate from one another. But if you define us according to our starting point, our source, the center of the wheel, we are a shared identity. If you dig deep enough into your mind and deep enough into mine, the picture is the same. As the bottom of it all, what we are is love. And so, you know, that to me, you know, speaks of the quality, the perspective that's needed in these days, is that, you know, if we want to create a peaceful world, a world that works for everyone, then we must choose a peaceful path. And that doesn't mean that we're passive. And I think Humanity's team is a brilliant example of that. There's action needed. But if you look at the source of our action, the source of our action is our identity, who we are. You know, like who is the one observing the world around us. And as that observer changes, and as we become different people who have a larger sense of who we are, a larger sense of the greatness of our purpose in living, a larger sense of our enormity of our power to create, that observer changes. And then what emerges out of that change in who I am, my sense of who I am, is the actions change. So if you just try to change the act, because we start with who we are, and then out of that come our actions, and out of that come our results. And people want different results in their life, and they stop at the action level. Well, I'll do different things, and then it'll be okay. But you have to go a step back from that of who am I? And, you know, this core question at the heart of all traditions, who am I? And if I'm, you know, separate from whoever, political figure, or separate from politician or, you know, leader in the world or group or ethnic group, if my starting point is I'm separate, then the actions that come out of that will not be the actions that create a peaceful world that works for everyone. So I really, you know, I'm saying this to myself as much as to any of us here, is that, you know, let's look at ourselves. You know, my favorite song in the whole world, Steve, is Michael Jackson's "The Man in the Mirror." You know, if you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and make a change. And then I think as we change as people, as our hearts and minds adopt a more, you know, oneness, loving, and what is oneness but love? Love is another word for oneness. Oneness is another word for love. As we change, as our sense of who we are changes, then what naturally comes out of that will change, and then we'll see the different results in the world. You know, I'm a very big fan of citizen activism and of taking responsibility and taking action, you know, what Martin Luther King called direct action in the world, but that action not coming from a place of division and hatred and separation, from this, Bernie Sanders, I guess, perspective, but we're all in this together, the oneness perspective.
Oh, beautiful. I love that, Michael. And the man in the mirror, yes, Michael Jackson, because it is as within, so without, right?
Yes.
Is kind of how that is said. And it is so true. If we create that inner peace, we can bring that to the world, and the opposite is true as well. And of course, it does require that we have incredible discipline in today's world to do what you share and to be an alchemist, which is how we can bring value to things in the world. Where
Yes.
we, as opposed to seeing these things, those atrocious things, and coming back with atrocious energy, instead to hold it and be compassionate with it. Come from a heart place instead of a thought place, and to come from a healing place. That's an easy thing to say, but it requires enormous discipline.
Courage.
And it's what we're being called to do, though, right now, isn't it? And I'm going to also just segue over. There's more questions here relating to personal health care. We're going to come back to those. Jim in Omaha and Mary in New Jersey have questions. We're going to get to those in just a second. But let's bring in Conscious Business, because you're a founding signatory, Michael, of the Conscious Business Declaration. And of course, if you go to consciousbussinessdeclaration.org, you can read this. An alliance that includes Humanity's team created this. And the reason it's so important is because it's not only important that we be good citizens, that we look at ourselves in the mirror, that corporations look at themselves in the mirror and look at just exactly what they're outputting or generating to their community. Financial profits, of course, are important, but that was never intended to be the whole mission and purpose of business. We've kind of lost our way here.
Yes.
The mission and purpose of business was to create healthy communities and to nurture humanity and to steward the earth and all of these kinds of things. But do you want to say a word about Conscious Business? Again, you're a founding signatory of the Conscious Business Declaration, Michael.
Yeah, thank you, Steve, and proudly so. Henry Ford said, a business that makes nothing but money is a poor kind of business. A business that makes nothing but money is a poor kind of business. And I've loved the conversations we've had over the years on this, that if we see the purpose of business, whether we're an employee in a business or whether we have our own business or whether we support someone who is in a business or a part of a business, it doesn't matter, that we understand that the ultimate purpose of business is to enrich people's lives in a very real sense, and to have a perspective on business that is not just the company and the customer, but it's what the company represents and brings into the world, and has a consciousness of something larger than even their customer base, but has a perspective of how can this, and this is what I ask myself, and have for decades now in my own businesses, is how can this business serve the whole? How can it serve the community? How can it serve, obviously, the people that are coming to us, our clients or customers? How can it enrich their lives? But how can it serve a larger purpose beyond that? And how can the interactions that we have with our clients, our vendors, our potential customers, whoever it is, be something creative? And that how can we, as in our company culture, and I have a wonderful little team, that works with me in bringing our, gifts into the world in service. And, we ask ourselves this question, and I try to encourage this, and as I know you did in your many years in business, Steve, is that how can we serve in a way that reveals integrity, in a way that reveals love, in a way that reveals compassion and honesty? How can the quality of our interactions with people be something very generative and creative? And then at a super practical level, what are the organizations that we want to support financially? And I review this regularly, and we have a list of about a dozen organizations that we support financially, that are doing work that's not ours to do, but we want to support them in what they're doing. And so I think this whole conscious business, and I'm really been happy to see that this idea of consciousness and of a higher values have really been, the business world largely has been open to this in many ways over the years, and there's been an openness, and we see this, in books that have come out, even the basic, seminal books like The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People from Stephen Covey, where there's something that can be reflected in how we serve and in our interactions, and just having a consciousness that this company, as it thrives, can help the world and those in it thrive.
Yes, well said. And our focus in the humanities team is growing this conscious business movement and the conscious economy, and shrinking the unconscious economy.
Yes.
The unconscious economy is where GMO and animal farming and some financial service products and natural resources companies that are over harvesting, and also practices like lack of transparency, where practices such as not focusing on sustainability, or better yet, going to a focus on restoring the Earth's self-renewing integrity. So our conscious business initiative is saying that we want to create healthy businesses in our community and globally, and as consumers we can play a role, because we can pay attention to companies and to see, if they're observing these conscious practices, ideally signing the Conscious Business Declaration and putting it into force. There's even a designation now called the Conscious Business Change Agent, CBCA, where people are given the tools to launch or to transition a business into a conscious state. We're in the process of creating a designation for the business itself. So we can go through an attainment process and check to see every 2 years that it's at this conscious level, either basic or a more advanced conscious level. As simple as when we go to the grocery store, just deciding what products we're going to select and purchase, buying products from conscious companies and not unconscious companies, because the thing we could see in the humanities team a few years ago, when we really decided to put a lot of energy and resources into this, is that if we only focus on personal development, how we can live as one, and be in a relationship with a partner as one, and be a conscious parent and so on, and we don't take this to the institutions of out in the world, especially business, then we'll never get there in terms of creating the earth that we all want for our children and for future generations. Businesses have to come in and participate. So this Conscious Business Initiative is hugely important. Again, Michael Gaeta is a founding signatory. By the way, I invite you to go to consciousbusinessdeclaration.org now if you haven't been there. It's a brief declaration. We encourage you to sign it. And also you can go to the Humanities Team website, and you'll see Conscious Business Initiative. You can click on that and go into an area where you can donate, $5, $15, $25. It helps our campaign to reach out to communities around the world and to educate about this whole Conscious Business Initiative. Any wrap-up thoughts, Michael, from you on this?
No, just that I'm so happy that the Conscious Business Initiative is happening. I think that conscious business is going to be and is becoming and really needs to be a primary driver of positive change in the world. I mean, I know you and I share this vision that all businesses that provide whatever goods and services they do adopts these principles, that business becomes a change agent itself for positive change in the world. And I certainly share that with you. And you're right. Businesses, and one of the things that you've shared with me that has always stuck with me is that businesses that don't do this are on their way out. Businesses that don't adopt some level of world-centric, at least, even if it's not cosmic centric, but at least world centric values and higher values that start with the oneness perspective, that those businesses that don't do that will not survive. Because as the world is waking up, then old structures and institutions and organizations that don't manifest this higher perspective that starts with this oneness perspective and creating a world that works for everyone and doing no harm are not going to survive, because people vote with their dollars. And I just remember just a simple example. There was an in-supermarket survey with hundreds of supermarket shoppers, and they found out that they chose Newman's Own, the Paul Newman brand of foods, over other brands with similar products because they were a social purpose business that donated their profits, or at least part of their profits. Now I think it's all profits. It used to be 10% to charity. And so like, wow, if I buy this salad dressing, a charity is going to get the profits from this purchase, or at least some of the profits from this purchase. And that made them choose that brand over other brands that didn't have that kind of brand promise or that social promise. And so, it brings up this wonderful quote that I just love from, it's exactly what you were saying, Steve, what you were saying earlier, and the Conscious Business Initiative totally exemplifies this. This is from Buckminster Fuller. You can never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. And that, I love that. I love that, love that. And that's exactly what the CBI is doing, and Humanities team is doing, is building a new model of business that makes the existing model, the profit at all costs, the Walmart model, where it's, savings above all, will trash the earth, but will give you a cheaper product. That mindset, we're not fighting it, but we're creating something. This is exactly true in healthcare, and this is what I'm about in healthcare, is we're not fighting the existing system. We're just creating something new in parallel that will eventually make the old system obsolete. So many kudos to you, Steve, and Humanities team for the Conscious Business Initiative. I think it's the future of business.
Yeah, well, thank you. I'll give those kudos. John Thomas, Steve Melville, Penny Heifel, Kristen Besa, Annette Kennedy, Demeyer. There are many, just a huge team that is that's really out in the lead here with our Conscious Business Initiative. They're doing a terrific job. As you mentioned, an evolutionary tornado has set down, and tornadoes are disruptive. That means that new leaders are emerging, and old leaders, unfortunately, will fall. It's not that we wish that on them, but it's the consumers, the public, all of us, youth, are, I think, more and more demanding that companies be good, responsible citizens, and that they're generating positive change in their communities. By the way, we've put links in the window for the Conscious Business Declaration, so you can just click on the link to go there and read it, sign it. We invite you to have your coworkers, friends, and family sign as well. There's also a link to donate if you want to support this this initiative financially, even again with $5 or $10 or $15. We put a link in the window as well for Michael Gaeta's website, so that you can go to his website. He's offering lots of free gifts and support to the public. So invite you to check those things out. Michael mentioned that there are examples of companies that are doing quite well because they're conscious. Tesla would fall into that category. There's a public company out of Europe called Unilever that also is very conscious. Those are bigger companies, and most of us in our communities here in Boulder, there are numerous conscious companies. We've got lots of organic farmers, conscious retailers. So invite you to just in your community really get to know the conscious companies and support them. And we're doing an intro course for the Conscious Business curriculum here on April 10th, so in about a month. It's only $300. It's a 6-week course, and it'll give you a full view of conscious business, the Conscious Business Initiative, ways that you can become a certified conscious business change agent, and how businesses will be moving toward this designation called conscious business. If you're interested in that, go to the Humanities Team website. There's a pull-down menu at the top that says conscious business. You'll see training and curriculum, and you can learn about that $300 course that starts on April 10th. Okay, let's come back to some questions here. Jim from Omaha says, what are some natural ways to lower one's blood pressure?
Oh, natural ways to lower one's blood pressure. Yeah. So a couple of things I found helpful, and one is avoiding wheat. So getting wheat out of your diet is a good idea. And you could read the book by the cardiologist called Wheat Belly is the book. You can read about that. Another thing is minimizing dairy products that are not raw. So pasteurized dairy products, good thing to avoid. Avoiding genetically modified foods, and this is in general, these are good things to do for everybody, but things that come to mind as well for this. So buying organic and knowing who your farmer is, trying to shop local, support local businesses, local farmers, know where your food comes from, farmers markets, organic community-supported agriculture groups, CSA groups. Get your food locally sourced and organic. It's not difficult to do these days in just about every community. Even in New York City, I was able to accomplish this. So those are some important things. But wheat, sugar, dairy, and most soy products, non-fermented soy products, are good things to avoid. Things that you can put in that tend to help. There's been a lot of good research on garlic in helping to lower blood pressure naturally. So having 1 or 2 cloves, preferably 2, but 1 or 2 cloves of garlic per day, either in your foods or just swallow it like a pill, is a really good idea. Those are some things that can really help. And I would, just again, consult a natural healthcare professional with experience in this area, who's done this a bunch of times before, to get some help. But and the other thing is, one of the kind of things that we need to know, or scams, I guess I'll just say it, is around blood pressure, that this whole 140/90 thing is completely arbitrary. There's no evidence to support 140/90. It's just made up. The Cochrane collaboration, COCHRANE collaboration, did a study of studies. They call it a meta-analysis of the available research on blood pressure, and found that adverse events only start to happen at a blood pressure of 160 over 95. And so this whole 140/90 doesn't really, I'm not saying blood pressure is irrelevant, but what we think high blood pressure is not what we thought it was. The old school approach was 100 for the top number, the systolic number, 100 plus your age as the upper limit, minus 10 points for females, was a standard that was used for decades. And then this kind of arbitrary made-up 140/90 thing came out. So blood pressure is not, is significant, and a very high blood pressure is very dangerous. But this 140/90 thing, I don't think people need to get too fussed about, unless they're really young. That would be, possibly elevated.
That's valuable. Yeah. Thank you, Michael. Here's a question. Mary from New Jersey says, is taking magnesium citrate drink daily good for your health?
Mag citrate can be helpful. I think conservatively, 74% of the U.S. population is deficient in magnesium intake. I would also refer you to the work of Carolyn Dean. She's a naturopath and a physician, D-E-A-N. She's published extensively on the subject of magnesium, if you want to learn more. And this magnesium citrate is magnesium bound to citric acid, and that's a reasonable form of magnesium. I use different forms of magnesium in my own practice, like lactate, but citrate's a very valid form of magnesium to take. The thing with taking magnesium every day is I tend not to recommend single minerals alone without all the other minerals. So using a good multi-mineral, not just or in addition to the magnesium, because all the minerals work together. The 21 nutritional minerals are very much a team. There's definitely oneness in the mineral world biochemically in our bodies. And so you want to make sure, ideally, you'd be taking a trace mineral supplement that gives you all the minerals if you're taking a single one as well. Because magnesium does need to be balanced with sodium, with calcium, with other minerals. And so, that's important. And as I said, if any of you are interested in a customized kind of individualized supplementation program, that's what we do, and we're happy to help you, whether you're in this area or virtually from wherever you live.
Great. Michael, autoimmune care is something you're putting a lot of focus on right now. Do you want to say a word about that?
Yeah, in 45 minutes, I'm going to be doing week 4 of our 6-week practitioner autoimmune course. So you can go to autoimmunemasteryprogram.com to learn more, and also contact us if you're interested in an autoimmune training and you're a practitioner. Autoimmune disease is a big deal, Steve. We are the world epicenter of autoimmune disease. The estimates now are that up to 1 in 5 Americans has one or more of 155 known autoimmune diseases. We have far more autoimmune disease per capita than any nation on earth by a wide margin. So we are the autoimmune epicenter and world capital of autoimmune disease in the world. So the reasons for that are several, but one big reason is that we are the most vaccinated country on earth, and that's simply because the pharmaceutical industry controls the government and the media, and the policy and the government organizations like CDC and FDA are controlled by the drug companies. Most of our elected officials are heavily influenced by drug companies, who are the #1 campaign donors by a very wide margin. Pharmaceutical lobbyists outnumber our legislators 2 to 1. And so, we are the only one of 2 nations on earth that allows direct-to-consumer advertising, where drug companies can advertise directly to consumers. Ask your doctor about, whatever it is. This is illegal in 197 nations on earth. Only 2 nations on earth allow it. The other is New Zealand. And so because the drug companies control the media through advertising dollars, they control the government through campaign donations and other special gifts, we are the most vaccinated nation on earth. And we know, this is scientific fact, that vaccines directly cause autoimmune disease, at least in many people. So that's big reason #1. So avoiding vaccines is part of which, are do much more harm than good. Are thing 1 to avoiding autoimmune disease. Thing 2 is that we are the global headquarters of Monsanto, and we consume the most genetically modified foods and heavily sprayed foods with glyphosate and Roundup, related chemicals. These chemicals, these herbicides and pesticides, directly cause autoimmune disease through very well-known mechanisms. Like, we know how vaccines cause autoimmune disease. We know how genetically modified foods and spraying our foods with Roundup causes autoimmune disease. But unfortunately, people don't know this, that 70 to 80% of our entire food supply contains genetically modified ingredients or is sprayed with these very toxic chemicals that are probably carcinogenic, according to the World Health Organization. So we are, for many reasons, but the 2 biggest ones is vaccines and glyphosate. We have the most autoimmune disease of any nation on earth. The good news is the autoimmune process is reversible, and you can prevent autoimmune disease. That's the best thing, is to prevent. It's better to prevent than treat. And if you have an autoimmune disease, it is reversible. And so, anyway, I've put a lot of attention on this. I've developed a high degree of expertise in this area, just because it's like an epidemic now, an epidemic where an estimate of at least 20% of the whole country has an autoimmune disease. That we got to turn this around, and there are very natural, ways to do that. But some of the things we talked about today will be very practical, specific things you can do to avoid or reverse.
Fantastic. Thank you. That's very, very helpful. Thank you, Michael. Okay, here's says, love to see and hear how socially responsible people go about solving the many problems that the world is faced with. Thank you for offering this time of creativity with us. So thank you. I don't have the person's name there.
Okay, you're welcome.
This is Catherine says, can you comment on the healing as voltage approach of Dr. Terry Tennant and the use of biomodulators in treating disease and pain?
Yes, I can't say that I can speak to that exact modality with any degree of expertise. I can say that using vibration and light and sound are profoundly, healing. I studied with Don Campbell many years ago in sound healing and toning and, creating tones with the voice, steady sounds with the voice. As a musician, I understand that. I use light therapy, low-level light therapy in my own practice as a primary treatment modality along with acupuncture and bodywork. I think all of these frequency approaches have enormous promise. And we know now, the physicists are telling us that our bodies are literally, physically, scientifically, our bodies are made of light. And so anything that harmonizes the frequencies of the body or helps the body's frequencies to harmonize, both through these various treatments, but also how we show up in the world with courageous love, is how we raise our vibration. These things are really valuable.
Fantastic. Okay, well, let me use this, take this opportunity to thank you so much here, Michael. Wow, what an incredible 90-minute program this has been. It's always such a pleasure having you. Michael's, again, my neighbor. His son
Yes.
and my daughter are in the same 6th grade class at a Waldorf school, and just a wonderful, wonderful person with a great family. So, Michael, I'm going to come back and thank you again, and also we're going to get to your website here again before we close the program. But let me just share a little. There's some upcoming programs that you don't want to miss. Join me on Thursday, March 16th. This is next Thursday. Dr. Bill Spady is going to join me and Anna Marie Peters to talk about oneness in education.
Great.
So that's a Oneness in 12 Spheres call. Dr. Bill Spady is just as Michael is upending healthcare. Bill Spady is upending education. Just there are incredible things he's doing worldwide. He's actually over in the Philippines working with their education system now. And then a week later, on March 23rd, Greg Braden is going to join us at 11:30 Pacific time to talk about science, spirituality, and our present times. These are all live programs, so be sure to join us and bring your questions. You can go to livinginone.com to register for all of these free calls. And if you miss the program, there's 48-hour free listening following each program. So now this program is focused on living in oneness, so we want to invite you to something called Community Circle. There's a link in the webinar window here that you can punch on it to learn more about it. It's only $10 a month. It's a virtual, intentional community for those living in oneness, for those who want to collaborate and connect with leaders involved in spiritual activism. It gives you continuous access to over 350 programs from the Living in Oneness Summit and Global Oneness Day. You can listen year-round with your family and friends. There's also a weekly Heart Circle video broadcast that we've created for members where they come together to share intimately about their successes and challenges, their journey in oneness. So all of these things, and it's only $10 a month. We intentionally made it very affordable. So you can click on the link in the window to learn more. Go to the humanitiesteam.org website and scroll down to the big rectangle that says Community Circle that's just down the page a little way. Thanks again, Michael. And Michael, do you want to bring in the websites that people can go to follow you and to work with you?
Yeah, happy to, Steve. Most of my life is practitioner training, and so if practitioners are interested in my trainings, they can go to, again, we created a web page just for today and this webcast, which is michaelgaeta.com/HT, HT for Humanities Team. And so there you'll be able to receive my free vaccine ebook. If you're a health professional, let us know, and we'll send you a series of 3 trainings on the clinical side, the business side, and also self-development that are for practitioners of various disciplines. And then certainly if practitioners are interested in more about my 1-year certification program in natural functional medicine, that's at cliniciansmastermind.com. And Steve Farrell is one of our guest faculty in this program who has received rave reviews for his teaching, And so Steve is part of our, we have 12 guest faculty, including Steve Farrell, for this program, in addition to myself. And so cliniciansmastermind.com is the website for that. And if you're a practitioner interested in learning more about autoimmune disease, you can go to autoimmunemasteryprogram.com, and that's a 6-week training that's available. And that probably is what I would mention. If you want more on vaccines, you can go to there's 2 websites I'll type in the box, which maybe your team can share. nvic.org, and the other one is learntherisk.org. So these are vaccine education and activism organizations. So yeah, so that's what I would say. Thank you. And our office number here, if you're interested in, you can go to the website for individual virtual consultations by phone or video. You can also call us at 303-442-2525. Again, 303-442-2525. We have a wonderful staff here that'd be happy to help you, and we do offer individual consultations for those interested.
Okay, thank you again, Michael. I highly recommend him. He's awesome. We use his services in my family. So thank you, Michael. Fantastic program. And I also want to thank my colleagues, Caroline Chang, Garth Catterall, Nanette Kennedy, and Dee Meyer. They're the ones that make this program possible. They organize and plan the whole thing, and I'm saving the best for last. Thank you to each of you for participating in this program and for being part of the Living in Oneness Summit and Global Oneness Day year-round. In closing, I want to invite all of us to really live as one. Of course, each of us will do this in our own way. When we live this way, we connect with the peace and presence and power of the divine. Okay, see you next Thursday, March 16th at 9 o'clock Pacific time, when we'll be talking with Dr. Bill Spady, an expert in oneness and education. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Thank you, Michael.
You're welcome.
Namaste, everybody.
Namaste.